So, Juck over.
We cannot allow everything to be stripped away from us because they change the formats around us, the traditions, the stadiums, the uniforms, the rivalries. We allow them to devalue it. We lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. Hey, welcome to Juck on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me on a Wednesday live edition of Juck on Bucks. I hope you've been setting those alarm bells. I'm warning you guys, I come on live every so often. I don't have a normal system of when I can do it. It's just kind of when I can do it. But I do love to get behind here maybe at least once a week and talk to you guys, at least at the end of the show. Have a good time. Please go ahead and like the video right now. If you're on Twitter, throw a retweet on there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts later on, I need some reviews. The number of reviews don't sync up with the number of uploads, and that's not a good thing for the algorithm. So if you could do that for me, that would be awesome. But thank you for joining me. Got a big show today. We're talking about some offensive line. We're talking about Larry Johnson's press conference last Friday because a whole lot of interesting tidbits came out of that thing. We haven't got to them, including a very rude question, I think. I'm going to get your opinion on that. But we're going over the safety board after a crappy piece of news. And I've got an opinion that a lot of you guys are going to hate, but, I got to get it off my chest anyway. We're going to talk some offensive line, of course, as we usually do. And when we talk about that, we'll wait till the end. I want to pop you guys up at the end. If you've got some interesting topics you think we should talk about, pull them up at the end. I'll bring you guys in and we'll go over it. Now, I do want to warn you in advance. All morning, I've been having some hiccups with the internet, but I had this thing scheduled, so I wanted to keep it going. If I get fuzzy, let me know in the chat. I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but it might be an issue. But let's start with new Buckeyes commit, Maxwell Riley, Tyler Bowen's first commit. And when we look at Max Riley, how does Max Riley stack up with the best commits that the Buckeyes have got on the offensive line in the past 3 cycles? When we look at Max, he is a top 100-ish player in the country at 115, and that's certainly excellent. A kid from Ohio. When we look at the previous class, we got Carter Lowe as your top commit. Carter Lowe, also a top 100-ish player in the country at number 74 in the composite, and he is a kid from Toledo that was an absolute must-win that came down to Ohio State and Michigan, and that's one of those double whammies. If you lose him, then you lose him to your rival. So it's a must win. Justin Fry pulled that off. You go the year prior, Luke Montgomery, a huge win, a top 120 player. This guy was a fan favorite early, and I think he's just going to continue to grow to be kind of the leader of that offensive line room. So happy to see his development. And then the year prior, Tegra Shabola. And Tegra was a borderline 5-star in the 247 internal, top 100 most places, but this was a big one. And here's an example. By the way, he was committed. Justin Fry was able to hold on to his commitment, so still an awesome job. But Tegra was an example of someone that most people thought he was going to be a tackle when he came in. And a lot of the conversation about Max Riley is, what's he going to be? Is he going to be a guard? Is he going to be a tackle? I think Max is going to be a guard myself. But just like Tegra, many people thinking he was going to be a tackle, he winds up a guard. You just never know until you see their skill set amongst their peers at the college level. But what we do know is that Tyler Bowen's first commit pretty much matches the best commit we've had in that offensive line group for the past couple of cycles. And after that, pretty sizable drop-off. So what I'm saying is if Tyler Bowen gets another guy around the top 100 here, he's already way ahead of the game in the uptick of the offensive line recruiting. And who are the guys on that wish list? When I talk about wish list, I'm not just talking about who's the next, best rated guys. I kind of marry the best rated guys versus the guys that I think the Buckeyes are in on pretty close with and moving in a positive momentum. And we start with 5-star Felix Ojo out of Texas. And his top 2 schools right now are Ohio State and Texas. From there, we go to Champ Smith, top 100 guy out of Vero Beach, Florida, who's been in on the Buckeyes and in love with the Buckeyes for a very long time. Of course, we got his teammate, TJ Alford, as a freshman this year, and his relationship with Ryan Day has always been very, very strong. So I feel really good about Champ Smith. Then we come to my city of Akron for Sam Greer out of Hoban. Sam, Ohio State, Missouri, Michigan. I've got Buckeyes for Sam. I think next we got Evan Goodwin. Evan Goodwin out of Arkansas was Tyler Bowen's first offer. I think he really, really likes him. And I think Evan really, really likes Ohio State. He'll be up soon. And a lot of these guys will be at the very first spring practice next week. So we could potentially see some more momentum and even another commit here on the offensive line here pretty soon. Of the recent offers that Tyler Bowen has put out, and I think it's been 6 now, I think that Deacon Schmidt is one that there's a lot of movement on as well. Deacon Schmidt, he's a guard, he's a mauler, not a very highly ranked kid, but the kid loves the fact that he got this Ohio State offer. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a commitment from him in the near future. But offensive line, as we enter the spring, didn't seem to be so interesting to me before that Tony Gerdeman article that I talked about the other day, where he talked about Ethan Anyanwa at right tackle, Austin Saraveld at left tackle starting the spring, which was just really surprising. And, if we're to think that maybe there's something to that, when we go back to last spring, when the hand, foot, and mouth ran through the team, Austin Saraveld was playing at left tackle, and he was doing relatively well. At least that's what we heard. But I do remember, I was thinking about this last night. There was an interview, and they asked him about that, and it came off as he was very uncomfortable to me he's like, I'll do whatever I need to do. But he seemed kind of uncomfortable about it. And a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that his high school pedigree, and he was, younger then. But I'm very interested to see what they're going to do there. But I really do believe when we look at the pieces on this offensive line, the guys in the room, you're 7 deep with 7 quality players. And I really think that Carson Hinsman and Luke Montgomery represent a strong leadership core in that group, which is so important, particularly when 2 of those 7 guys are brand new, being brought in out of the transfer portal. But with Tegra Shabola, Luke Montgomery, Austin Saraveld, that 3-pack of guards that was rotating at the end of the year, there's a lot of thought that they might just continue that. And I'm not so sure about it. I guess my hope is that 2 of those guys end up taking another big step forward this offseason. You'd love to have all 3. I don't think that's realistic. But for 2 of those guys to really take a big step forward, that would be fantastic. Again, we talk about that rotation. That was very unique. Not something we see often on offensive lines. Tyler Bowen, a different offensive line coach, he may not particularly be fond of that idea. So I wouldn't pencil that in as something that we know they're going to do for sure at this point. But tomorrow we will talk about every position group heading into spring. What are the hard questions? What are the difficult questions for some of those players in those rooms? And if you got some, please make sure to leave those in the comments. But I want to get to some recruiting. Caden Gebhart, obviously, Tuesday, I was feeling myself. I came on here. I was talking all sorts of crap about Clemson. Goes to the kid. Of course, last week, we had the big whammy as Adam Guthrie committed to Pawpaw in Clemson. Mr. Rogers looking Mississippi goofball coming up into the state of Ohio, trying to plant this Clemson flag. And then the disrespect afterwards with the best in Ohio come to Clemson with Max Riley and Caden Gebhart tagged on that thing, man. Clemson just had quite a few over the weekend. Naeem Burrows and obviously Adam Guthrie, who we talked about. They got Grant Wise, who was an offensive lineman I loved, another interior guy that we offered at a camp last year. And they got themselves a good little class going. So good for little Clemson, who finished outside the top 15. Oh, okay. So I was going in on Clemson a little bit, and I couldn't get 24 flipping hours, man, before Clemson pulled the second kid out of the state of Ohio that the Buckeyes were pursuing. And that was Caden Gebhart from Olentangy, a safety who 3 or 4 years ago, to the beginning of time of Ohio football, that kid's a lock. Like that player, that's an absolute lock to Ohio State. If Ohio State wants him, there's not a second question. And he committed to Clemson. And I had a bad feeling about this. An absolute joy to watch. So he is also the teammate of number 45 in that film, CJ Sana. And CJ Sana, the linebacker that James Laurinaitis recently offered. And these two together are just vicious. Love watching them. Love watching this film. The problem is, it's not looking great. I mean, it looks good, but he's big in on Penn State. He really likes Penn State, and he's big in on Clemson. And I don't know what in the world it is with Clemson in Ohio this cycle, but it's really irking the hell out of me. And it certainly has paid off for Clemson, investing heavily in Ohio this cycle. And I didn't want to believe it at the time. I didn't have a good feeling about Gebhardt, but we're just in the second year of what I consider this new world of recruiting. And boy, we are in it big time. Like I said, this is a guy that this wouldn't have even been. This is a Tressel special, right? That's what this kind of guy. It's a Jim Tressel special. And I think he really would have been a fan favorite type of kid. He's nasty the way he plays, hits like a ton of bricks, brings the fire. Definitely would have been a guy that everybody loved. And he has just decided to go play in the mighty ACC for Dabo Swinney. It's disgusting. It's gross. It's repulsive. It makes me want to vomit. Does it hurt the class of 2026? No, probably not. Probably not. And that might be part of the reason why he went to Clemson, because the Buckeyes board at safety is just about as good as it gets. Now, I do think the kid's undervalued. I do think that, there is something to Ohio players playing at Ohio State, and I want them. But if the Buckeyes close the way they're looking right now at safety, they're going to have one of the best safety classes, if not the best in the country, because right now, Braylon Womack, to me, if you had to bet Buckeyes or the field, I'm betting Buckeyes. And when we look at the board that the Buckeyes have right now at safety, I made this beautiful graphic for us. Braylon Womack, all the way on your left there, that is the number one target, not just the number one target, but in most people's opinions, the number one safety out of Mississippi. And sure, it's tough to pull a kid out of Mississippi, but just like we're having issues losing guys out of our state, so are other schools like Louisiana, who lost Jakeem Stewart last year, which moves us over. And the reason that Blaine Bradford isn't on this board, though. So Blaine Bradford is the number 2 or number 1 safety, depending who you talk to, safety in the country. He's out of Louisiana, and you got to bring him up because Ohio State is one of his 3 schools. And he said Ohio State is basically number 2 or number 1 or number 2, and Texas is a distant third after LSU. But the problem is his brother goes to LSU, and it's just like, okay. I mean, I don't know, man. That's a tough ask right there. But it is pretty interesting. But Braylon Womack, the number 1 guy, a Buckeye fan. I love the guy as a player. He's a big-time leader. He loves McErary. He's been to Ohio State several times. He's coming to Ohio State for an unofficial, and then he's got his official scheduled June 20th. So he's coming once more before he even comes for his official. And if you get Braylon Womack in the class, it's a wonderful safety class, no matter who you get as your kicker. And you just might end up getting a guy like Simeon Caldwell. And Simeon Caldwell is another excellent safety out of the Bulls school, and that is in Jacksonville. We already have a commit in this class from the Bulls school. Simeon Caldwell, 6'3", 185, teammates with Corbin Fordham. That's the tight end. Also teammates with Naeem Burrows, who just committed to Clemson. But the Buckeyes' secret weapon on this one is Tim Walton. Tim Walton, his blood uncle. Simeon told me he's got no preference whether he plays safety or linebacker in college. He might outgrow safety. He's a really big kid. Next, we've got Jet Washington. We're required by law to say this is Kobe Bryant's nephew. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. Another extremely highly rated safety. He's huge. Like, this is a big kid, man. And again, another one that I'm not so sure he's at safety long term, but a total stud. And then Bucks are in on Joey O'Brien. He's on the board, but this is a guy that I think everybody believes winds up at Penn State. Really good looking prospect, the type of kid that he's just as good of a receiver as he is a safety, just a different level athlete. And as I said, the Bucks are looking really, really good at safety. So the loss of Caden Gebhardt doesn't really sting when we talk about the position. The reason the Caden Gebhardt thing stings is it's just another piece of evidence that confirms to all of us that, those of us who thought this was not just a Trey McNutt, Justin Hill thing last cycle, that this was more the new reality of modern day recruiting when it comes to the state of Ohio. We're just not used to this. There's a couple states in the country, Louisiana's one, Ohio's one, where you've got one huge school and everybody in the state is a fan of that school, and you're not used to seeing kids leave. And when you look at a state like, let's say Texas, for instance, take Texas, for instance, why is it more likely that people aren't surprised when kids from Texas don't go to Texas? Well, number one, there are several huge schools at Texas. Not everybody's a Longhorns fan. Number two, there are way more players in the state of Texas that are worthy of a Texas offer than they can fit. You can fit all 10 of your kids at Ohio State. It's a 25-man class. You can do the same in Louisiana. But you've grown up, if you are from Texas, seeing all these high-profile prospects go other places. If you grew up in Ohio in my era, the best players in Ohio didn't go anywhere else. They only went to Ohio State, which is why it's very jarring to see that now we are being affected like everybody else in the new modern era of recruiting. The question is, does Ohio State change their tactics? Because, we talked about the other day, they talk about prioritizing Ohio recruits. Do they really? I mean, their actions to some of the parents and some of the people that follow recruiting would say not really. They do want it to look like that because they know that many Ohio State fans feel very similar to the way I feel, which is there is a little extra to Ohio players playing at Ohio State. And again, I'll go back to the day that the dead period ended when Ryan Day and the assistant coaches were in Mississippi and Georgia and Florida. Dan Lanning, followed by Kalen DeBoer and Alabama's staff, and then Lincoln Riley, were all in Ohio, which, that doesn't look right. It certainly doesn't look good if you're an Ohio recruit or a parent of an Ohio recruit, and the coaching staff is telling you they're prioritizing you when these coaches are flying from across the country to come here, and your coach, who's right down the street, is down south. However, when you look at it from the Buckeyes' point of view, if you're trying to prioritize things, you got your number 2 running back target, Derek Cooper, in Florida. Your number 2 defensive tackle target in Deuce Geralds is in Georgia. You've got maybe your number 1 overall target right now, and that's Braylon Womack in Mississippi. So how do you prioritize where you go? There's no perfect answer, but you certainly see why it makes sense for Ryan Day to go do that as well. So it is what it is, man. When we talk about the Ohio recruits and the reason that we love them is because they bring that little extra Jack Sawyer with them. You know what I mean? However, if you're an Ohio recruit and you go to a place like Clemson, are you the type of dude that would have brought that with you anyway? You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe you didn't grow up with that little Jack Sawyer in you. So it is what it is, guys. It's just the way we're going to have to learn how to live with the new era of recruiting in the state. I don't know what else to say about it. It's a bummer. It's certainly not fun when we look at the state of Ohio and we look at the top 12 guys in the state and we see it look like that. Now, 10 of those guys offered by the Buckeyes. Numbers 4 and 5, no Buckeye offers, which means you really got 10 offers out of that top 12, and you've got an Illinois commit and 2 Clemson commits, and then 3 Buckeye commits. So 3 and 3, you're hitting 50% on the guys you want in a state that used to be like, man, you're getting 90%. If you offer that, that's what it is. So anyway, we got one thing I will say about this Clemson thing. This is not about money. This is not Clemson coming in here throwing big dollars around. Though we do got somebody in our conference that does that, and I've got a pretty funny story about that particular program. Now, Oregon fans, I like the ones that hang around here. I call them the Duck Eyes. They're cool. They're loyal listeners, and they're always very reasonable. But Oregon fans do very much dislike the fact that Nike is kind of thought of to be the program. They're the Nike program, and they don't like the fact that people say they buy all their players. Like, it really irritates them, and I understand. And I also think that if Nike backed Ohio State like it did Oregon, like, we would certainly want Ohio State to take every advantage that they could with that deal. But some Oregon fans will say things like Ohio State is the biggest Nike contract there is, which makes zero sense. That's funding the athletic department, which has nothing to do with NIL. But what does have something to do with NIL is Oregon and Nike just released the duck-themed new Air Max 95 and 97s. New shoes from Nike, and all the proceeds of these shoes go to Division Street. And if you're not hip to Division Street, that's Oregon's NIL collective. And Division Street, not like your normal NIL collective. You know how Ohio State's NIL collective, they want us to sign up for monthly donations, and many of us do. And if you're one of those folks who has been able to afford to do that and has done that for the last several years, thank you. We certainly, as a fan base, stepped up and put our money where our passion is and refused to be left in the dust by bum programs who tried to buy their way into the big boys club. I'm not talking about Oregon specifically, more Miami, programs like that. But the thing about Oregon NIL is they don't operate like the 1870 or the foundation. They don't want their fans' money. They don't solicit donations from Oregon fans. They say, no, we got this. We're going to make shoes. And that's what they do. So pretty interesting. The only NIL in the country that doesn't want money from their fans. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like the fact that Oregon has this Nike advantage, and they're looking very much forward to the new thing coming out with the new rules, with the settlement that is going to include the clearinghouse. And what the clearinghouse is any NIL deal over $600 that comes from a company to a player, a company that's affiliated with the school in any way, which certainly Nike qualifies. They run the NIL for Oregon, that those deals are going to be vetted, and they got to be true NIL deals. And those dollars got to make sense. They can't just be some off the wall deal like, okay, I'm paying a third string guy $100,000 for a billboard. Like that doesn't line up. How are they going to make that verdict on what that deal is going to be worth? Well, they got a database, and they're going back looking at all the deals that were ever made of this type for these types of players, and they're spitting out a number. So Oregon's known this is coming from a year. Well, they know they got guys like Chris Henry Jr. coming up. So what do? They got a guy like DeCorian Moore, number 1 wide receiver in 2025, and they've structured his deal, juiced up the numbers, and juiced up all their guys' numbers. So now when you go to look at the like deals, you've got all this precedent of, okay, this is what these deals have been, and that's what they're going to look like going forward. So the problem is none of this is going to stop when it comes to Oregon and those Nike deals. Like that, they're good. They've covered their butts. They've got Nike on this. You know what I mean? So none of that's going to stop for them. I do think that we will see a lot of programs have some issues with the way they've been funding NIL, but not those guys. They're going to keep on pumping. Anyway, appreciate you guys so much for tuning in today. This is the time of year where there's not a ton of material every day. I love to read your comments because it lets me know what I'm hitting on, what I'm missing on, what you want highlighted on the show. And the coolest moment since I started this show was reading a comment of after the game, a Buckeye fan from Arkansas. And I read this guy's comment on the show. He had driven up all the way from Arkansas to come to the game. It was his first time in the shoe. Kid who was raised in Arkansas, but he was born in Ohio. So he was always a Buckeye fan, got made fun of. So he drives up to the game, and obviously his first game in the shoe was that game, which is like, man, I felt bad for this guy. So I read his comment on the show, and then I go to the Tennessee game, and this dude comes up to me. It's like, hey, I'm the guy from Arkansas, literally sitting in my row. Coolest thing ever. And that's why I do the show, and I love reading your comments. So please leave them. I always read them. It's always delightful. And I got some big news for those of you who love, what do you call them? Chapters. So I've tried to add chapters to my videos several times because you guys have asked me forever. And there is this automatic button on YouTube that is supposedly going to add these things for you. And I pushed the button several times and unchecked it and checked it again. And it never works. But there's also a manual way. And I tried that too, and that didn't work either. Then I asked my brother if he could give it a shot yesterday, which he did, and it worked. And then he showed me how, and it was quite easy. I just needed to fix one thing. So I Can't promise you I'm going to do it every day because it is a little time consuming, but it looks like I'm going to be able to add chapters, which is important when you talk about a lot of different topics for people who just want to get to what they want to see. So we're going to get some chapters here as we continue to try to, level up a little bit and a little bit more here at Juck on Bucks. Now, I do want to get to Larry Johnson's interview. And Larry Johnson's interview Friday, man, we were all over the place, but it started with the first question. Well, I mean, it wasn't actually a question. It was more of a statement, but anyway, here it is.
Well, Larry, you're here.
Larry, you're here. All right, then came question number one.
Get one more in you, a couple more in you. How much longer we got?
You got one more in you, couple more in you. How much longer we got? Now, this is a perfectly acceptable line of questioning if this is someone who's publicly contemplated retirement. Larry never has. He's never has. So when you say something like that, what you're saying is, you're old. I think you should be thinking about retirement. What are your thoughts on that? I was pretty taken aback by that. I thought it was pretty rude. I wasn't the only one.
There's going to be some catch up that needs to be done there. And you do what you can. And then Larry Johnson's always going to be battling the rumors. Like the first question he got on Friday, another year, huh? Is basically the question. And it's like, and I think there was the same thing the year before. Like, how much longer are you going to do this? And he's like, I'm here, aren't I?
Journalism on journalism fire. I love it. He paused there after the first statement. He was maybe going to get a little riled up there. That's my man, Tony Gerdeman. That is the funniest guy in Ohio State media. I love listening to that dude. Just the most dry, excellent sense of humor. The punchlines are always perfect, but he's hysterical. But Larry answers the very classless question with a very classy answer, of course.
God say I got to stop.
Did you think this offseason, going out on top, winning a national championship, those classes, I know how important those guys were, you, Jack and JT, that maybe that was the time? What was the thought process for you this offseason?
Never thought about it. This is on to the next guys, a group of guys that I brought in. I think about, get those guys out. So that was my thought. It's a nice thought, but it wasn't my thought.
Never thought about it. Never thought about retiring and going out on top with Jack and JT in Ty and Ty League. And in most cases, when we listen to these coaches behind the microphone, I always try to put myself in their shoes to look for the motive. Why are they saying what they're saying? Is there someone that maybe they're talking to and in an indirect way, or is there something that they're trying to hold off, which in Larry's case is always going to be negative recruiting about him retiring. So if he puts out, I thought about it and blah, 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 that's in Deuce Gerald's and Aiden Harris's Snapchat in 35 seconds that Larry Johnson was thinking about retiring. So Larry has to say, no, I never thought about it. Do you think he thought about it? I honestly don't think he did. Like, some folks are just wired differently. And part of me believes that Larry is one of these dudes that's like, look, man, this is what I do. I work. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's an interesting situation. It's going to be an interesting situation moving forward. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Tony Washington Jr. now in that room. Tony Washington Jr., I like what he adds from a rushing perspective, but it's not some obvious heir apparent kind of guy that we were all kind of hoping for. You bring in that heir apparent kind of guy. Doesn't matter if you're negative recruiting against Larry. Doesn't matter if Larry announces that he's going to be retiring in a year or two, because now every recruit that you're bringing in knows, like, we got the next guy right here, and we like him just as much. So when Larry leaves, we've got this guy. And it just doesn't appear to me like Washington Jr. is that type of dude. It doesn't appear to me like he has that kind of. Now, there are some positions where I think it's a good thing to, promote from within. If you got a guy who's a real winner and a real star. There's others where I think that they're a little bit of star power really, really helps. And when it comes to defensive line, I think it's one of those positions where you want that name brand recognition when you're trying to go after the best of the best in the country. So that's my thoughts on that. But getting into what Larry had to say about some of the players on the team, our buddy Dylan Davis brought up an interesting question that I hadn't really thought about. Last year at this time, Larry brought up Joshua Mickens, unprompted, wasn't asked, and talked about Joshua Mickens, who a lot of people had kind of forgotten about. And Larry brought him up, said he was kind of coming out of nowhere. So Dylan asked him about Joshua Mickens.
So I'm looking for great things for him to go forward. He seemed to be in a good space right now. I like where he's at. So, but we got a lot of days to go to them ready. So I'm very confident he'll be ready.
Larry, what do you guess the same thing when it comes to Will? He's injured, I think, his freshman year.
Yeah.
Hasn't really played a lot of football for you. Is it kind of the same thing with him, or is it a little different with him?
A little different. We changed his position a little bit, trying to find the right fit.
So if you can't hear, and I know it's quiet. Here's the funny thing. Larry is a very soft-spoken guy. Now, when those coaches sit down, doesn't matter who it is, they ask that, they always ask him, can you move up to the microphone? They don't say a thing to Larry. They don't say a thing. You go ahead, big man. You sit right there. But Larry, about Mickens, didn't have a whole lot to say. About Will Smith Jr., said that they have moved him to one tech, trying to find the right position for him. And, I don't think anybody thinks that either of those guys are going to be, guys that break out this year. But they did talk about Jason Moore. And Jason Moore, obviously someone that the Buckeyes really are kind of relying on this year. 6'6", 290, a top 50 recruit, now in year 3. I would have expected a guy of his caliber to have flashed at some point by now. He hasn't. He hasn't flashed at all. Got all the physical gifts, but I can't recall him looking like a stud football player on the field, in practice footage, in a game, in any of the time he's had. And this is the year that he's really going to be relied upon. Like, we need something out of Jason Moore this year. And this is what Larry said. He told him. They've had this conversation. Like, this is your year. We've built the foundation. So what are we going to see out of Jason Moore? I certainly hope it's something. And then, of course, they talked about transfer from the FCS, Logan George.
He's from the same hometown as Tommy Togiai. I didn't know there was any connection.
What made you want to bring in Logan George, and how do you see him fitting into this?
Well, you look for a fit, right? Most important thing, he fit. Does he fit our defense? Does he fit our scheme? Does he fit our culture? That's all important when you bring a guy in from the court. It's got to be a fit. And sitting, talking to him, talking to the family, talking to his coach was really raved about him as a player. Once we sit down and met and talk, I felt like he fit our room. Great character, can rush. He plays hard, and everything you want to see, you got to have. He has. And so I'm looking forward to see where he goes from here. Yeah.
Larry, was there anything he's from the same hometown as Tommy Togiai. I didn't know there was any connection.
Same high school.
Yeah. Was there anything with the Togiais that helped you learn more about Logan?
Well, not necessarily about learn, but I know that he coached really well. And the minute I picked the phone and called him, he gave rave reviews of him as a player, as a person. And that was a hint for me, because you're going to have some information. And the head coach just couldn't love him, because couldn't stop talking about him as a player and a person. So when I brought him in and talked to mom and dad and set him down, wow, it was pretty good.
What do you need to see from a guy like him to know that can translate to Ohio State? Because this is actually quite literally the top of the sport right now.
Yeah.
So how do you know that that's going to translate from FCS?
Based on what I've seen thus far, his skill set is there. It's going to translate. It's going to translate. If not, I made a huge mistake.
If not, I made a huge mistake. He's saying if Logan George's skill set doesn't translate, I've made a huge mistake. And the way he answered the question gave me a whole lot of confidence that what Logan George is showing them so far is really good stuff. And that's obviously great news on a defensive line, especially on the edge. That's not very deep. All right, let's get to the controversy, which obviously you've probably heard now, that Larry came out and said that he and Jim Knowles never had a problem, and that the reason the media thinks that they had a problem was they think that Larry is a 4-3 guy specifically, and he's not. He's whatever the team needs kind of guy, and the media doesn't understand that. They think that it's all about, okay, Knowles is 3-4, I'm 4-3, and he went on and on and on about that for a good amount of time. And my contention was that was never the issue. The issue was always about removing one of Larry's guys from the field. And he pretty much confirmed that. He went on and on about how, you can just take Kenyatta and stand him up, and now you're in a 3-4 because you don't want to, you don't want to keep substituting. You can't do that every play. So I'll just let him tell you.
Well, 4-3, you take a 4-3, everybody's confused that I'm a 4-3 guy, but really, you take a 4-3, you take Ed and stand him up, you can slide to a 3-4 just like that. And that's multiple defense without changing any personnel. And so it's a 4-man brunt, but we can go to a 3-man, a 4-man, a 5-man, 6-man in a heartbeat with the guys on the field. So I think that we've been multiple, but we keep saying it's a 4-man front, but it can be interchangeable 4-man front. Yeah, that's it. It's awesome, man. It's how you look at it. Everybody can say it's 4-man front, 4-man front. Not really when you kind of to the pieces. The 4 guys can stay on the field, and you can pop JT or pat KJ up, and next thing you know, it looks like a 3-4. But it's 4 guys on the field playing that's been in the game. And so I think that we kind of lose how you play defense now because you can't substitute every play.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's it right there. And that's exactly why it was Jack Sawyer who was playing the Jack when they played the Jack, because it was one of Larry's guys. And what happened when it didn't work out with Jack? They totally abandoned it, right? Because it was one of those guys from that room, or it was nobody else. And you'll remember the year after that, Larry totally dismissed the Jack like he didn't even know what it was. We played that press conference. I don't know. What's he play? Is he in the linebacker room? It's quite obvious that there was definitely 2 stubborn guys who believed that their way was the best way. I mean, I don't know how anybody could deny that, but I'll tell you why. Like when we talk about people and personalities and stuff, it was probably never an issue to Larry because Larry won. Larry won every one of the battles. His guys always stayed on the field. At any rate, it was pretty funny. Now, we then got to everybody's favorite topic. And the favorite topic we've had for the last 3 years, which is
transition. He's right. We want to use it first and second. And once we accomplish as we go,
because of his versatility, but stand
being in space, that's different. And once we accomplish as we go, then I think he'll give a chance to give us some great depth and really do some good things for us. I'm excited about him because he's really excited about the position change.
Larry, when you talk about being multiple, how impactful can a guy like CJ be?
Obviously, I had a hard time finding my spot there. CJ Hicks. Larry says he's moved down to his room. A lot of Buckeye fans very excited that Larry had revealed that because they talked to James Laurinaitis earlier on, and James played dumb. James, I don't know. We'll see when we get back. I don't even know. I don't know what's going on with CJ. And Larry's like, oh, yeah, he's been working with me. But the CJ Hicks questions took up a big chunk of the press conference. So Larry bringing him down into his room, and he's going to teach him how to play defensive end, not some pass rush specialist. He's going to be a stand-up defensive end. And I have heard our Abdul Carter, our Micah Parsons. Finally, we get to see what Baron Browning would have done if they'd have used him the right way at Ohio State. And last year, the conversation about CJ Hicks, and I was arguing with a lot of people about this. So we knew Sonny Styles, when he moved down from safety, if it was going to be him and CJ pitted up against each other, that Sonny was going to win that battle, despite CJ being in year 3 at linebacker. And a lot of people were irritated about that because why was Cody Simon seemingly locked into the Mike role? This is Ohio State. We should be competing for all these spots. Cody wasn't a starter last year. Why isn't Gabe Powers involved in this? And because of that, people were slamming Cody, which I thought was just absurd. CJ Hicks was a 5-star and thought to be more dynamic than Cody. And that is all this was. Coming off of Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, people wanted these 2 freaky athletes, CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles, to be next to each other because that's what we envisioned when they came in. And nobody thought Sonny was actually going to remain at safety. But CJ in year 3 fights it out with Sonny. We heard a lot of positive stuff about CJ all spring, guys. Remember, he was getting it. It was clicking. It was finally clicking for CJ. That was a whole lot of shows we watched over the spring last year. Best blitzer on the team, but There's a lot more to play in linebacker, and he was getting it. So we start the season. He plays 30 snaps right off the rip, and it's immediately obvious that he's not close to the level needed to play linebacker. I said it. The blowback from that was insane. I remember it. Like, people were mad at me. I wasn't back in town. It was very evident when his snaps went from 30 to like 6 in the first 3 games that he wasn't getting it done at linebacker, and he very quickly fell down the depth chart. There were so many moments where I was watching this guy on film from the end zone view, the all 22, and it wasn't just that he looked like he was stuck in the mud with decisions, which we all know was an issue. It was the patty cake this guy played with his hands. It was uncomfortable to watch from someone we've been told has these dynamic athletic traits. He couldn't tackle. I couldn't, it didn't even comprehend to me that this guy that we have been told and led to believe is some dynamic athlete played football like this. Baron Browning, this is a guy, like, I almost find it insulting when people compare him to Baron Browning. Baron Browning got himself on the field, got himself 70 tackles and 16 tackles for loss and 6 sacks through his 3rd year. CJ had 17 tackles and 2 sacks in his career. Let me propose this. I think that we can all agree that the baseline here, many of you tell me you don't care about stars. If player X comes into Ohio State and plays the same position for 3 years, in year 3, this guy is 5th string. In year 3, playing behind Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, and Gabe Powers. 5th string after 3 years, then gets moved to another position his senior year. What is the reason there is any talk about player X at all? What's the reason? It's because he was a 5-star and perceived to be an excellent athlete. So if you're excited about Hicks, about this move, it is, don't you dare tell me it's because this guy got 2 sacks on 2 blitzes. It's because he was a 5-star and perceived to be an excellent athlete. I would propose to you that he has never been the athlete that he's been touted to be. Never. There's 2 different kinds of athletes, right? There's the ones that we can clearly see that athleticism on the field, maybe they don't test well, but when they get out there, man, they got that football speed. And then there's the workout warriors, the combine warriors, who maybe they don't show it on the field, but wow, you get them in the gym, it really comes out. Well, it's one or the other. CJ doesn't show it on the field. What's he show it on the testing? We do that at Ohio State, shuttles and dashes and bench presses and feats of strength and vertical jumps and broad jumps. There's 15 boards in the Woody, 15 of them. Testing, you got the top 10 in every single category. In those categories, run the gauntlet from big man to small man. You're going to have an advantage in one of them or several of them. And they keep those up there all year. And the last time I was there, I took a picture of every single one of those boards because I wanted to find out, all right, who are the players that are the most athletic, the most versatile on the most ones of these boards? And of the linebackers, Sonny Styles had his name on 2 of those boards. Now, there were 2 players who had their name on 5 of those boards, the most athletic on the team. And it was pretty surprising. But Sonny had his name on 2. Cody Simon, the only one of those linebackers that made 3 of those boards. CJ Hicks wasn't on a single one. So if he doesn't show it in athletic testing and he doesn't show it on the field, this guy's just been overrated his whole career. That's it. He got a good jump on a couple of sacks, and that's all we've ever seen. I can line you up 25 plays that show average athleticism out of CJ Hicks by Ohio State standards. And I understand that 90% of people are going to disagree because there's a whole lot of hope factor because of what this guy was supposed to be. You heard Larry. Larry's teaching him how to play stand-up defensive end. He's got to be well-rounded. He's got to be able to do it all to earn playing time. I'll remind you, he's a very poor tackler. This dude got ran over by Marshall's quarterback. You remember he had a free run at Hudson Card and got juked out of his shoes to the point he was on the ground. And I'm supposed to believe that that guy is going to take away snaps from Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry and Logan George. He's the secret weapon, the 5th string linebacker in year 3. Is he any better than Josh Mickens? What makes you think he's better than Josh Mickens? Because Mickens wasn't a 5-star? Like, that's literally it. That's it. Prediction number 1. Logan George will have more sacks than CJ Hicks this year. And we're going to hear all of spring questions about CJ Hicks over and over and over again. Remember what Matt Patricia, when he came in, what did he say? I'm looking at Arvell. I'm looking at Sonny. Like, if they're doing anything special, it's not CJ going in that role. It's those two who are both better athletes and better football players and better tacklers. And you think so too, because if you had one guy, you need to send one of those 3 guys on a blitz to win the game. Who you picking? Not one of you's picking CJ Hicks. Get out of here with that. Anyway, I love CJ Hicks, the man. When they had last year the special needs kids, these special needs kids come and practice with them. They interviewed him. You could see the joy on his face, and I respect the hell out of that. Seth McLaughlin too. I don't forget things like that. And then he talked about Cody Simon, and he said, I love that man. And it was so sincere. I was like, man, this is an awesome dude. And I'm not saying any of this to bash him. This is more about the media creation that has pumped this guy to the fact that we've had to hear about him so disproportionately to what he's done at Ohio State, so much more so than a guy like Arvell Reese, who's about to potentially be an All-American. And I got to hear about CJ Hicks again. Shows, every other show. CJ Hicks is doing it. Dude, I'm telling you, this is the most overhyped player that we've had at Ohio State in a decade. Like, it's that serious. I don't get it. I don't understand what nobody else sees. I'm going to be on an island here. I hope that he proves me wrong, because then it means that he has blown up and become the NFL player that he was supposed to be and really helped the team. And I'll happily look like an idiot at that point. But I think it's everybody else who's looking like an idiot running show after show after show about CJ Hicks again, like we just did this 2 years in a row. Nobody's learning their lesson here. Anyway, that's sure to piss a lot of you off. I get it. I'm just, everything I see, I watch all these shows. I read all the articles and nonstop with the CJ Hicks. And I'm just like, here we go again, man. Here we go again. So, yeah, sometimes when I do the show, when I put it together, like I do it throughout the day, I'll do a segment here, jot down my notes, a segment here, and then I'll sit down and I'll structure it all at the end. And sometimes I'll structure it and be like, man, I didn't realize this because I didn't do the show all at once. I did separate segments, but this is all like positive stuff. I'm going to sound like a sunshine pumper. And I never like to sound like 100% of anything but Buckeye. Like, I don't want to be pigeonholed and this guy's a sunshine pumper or this guy's a hater. But man, there's some segments I read at the end. I'm like, wow, there's going to be a lot of people mad at me about that one. This will probably be it because it sounds like a personal attack. I get it. The attack is against the media in an illogical analysis. It's just totally illogical. That's it. Anyway, we'll open it up to your comments now, which should be fantastic. Richie Dubs, 114 watching, only 28 likes. Yeah, let's get that up. Matt Hoffman got in late, but the Gebhardt point, some kids just want to get away for college. Nothing you can do about that. Not part of what we were able to pull. That's part of why we were able to pull Nate Roberts out of Oklahoma. Yeah, Matt, it's not specifically about Gebhardt. It's about all of a sudden you've got top tier Ohio players in 2 consecutive classes that Ohio State is in on, in Trey McNutt, in Justin Hill, in Caden Gebhardt, in Adam Guthrie. Like, this isn't something we've ever seen like this. It's the totality. Gebhardt's not going to make or break this class. This safety class is going to be fantastic. It's more about that. Tyler says, the beat media of Ohio State does nothing but lie to fans, but there are certain shows that tell the truth, and I say no names. If you know, you know. I'll just say that. Emily says, go, Chuck. You're always respectful and have evidence. It's all good. Oh, here we go. Here's one of our duck eyes. Chuck, you should purchase some of Oregon's 95 and 97s to support. Those are the shoes And those are the shoes that are going to Division Street, Oregon's NIL. What's up, Jimmy Jackson? JJ says, what's up with Rock Hill? No official visit to Ohio State. That's crazy. All right. I know, like, I was on a show last night. Everybody should go check out. Hang on just a second. I got to get a drink. So my buddy Garrison over at the Voice of College Football Ohio State channel started a program last night that he's called the Buckeye Brigade. And what he's doing is he's inviting different Ohio State people who do different Ohio State shows and bringing them together on a panel. I believe it's every other Tuesday of the month, and just discussing topics with a bunch of different people in a panel. This came up last night. So Rock Hill's 4 first official visits came out. Ohio State wasn't on there. That doesn't mean he's not going to take an official visit to Ohio State. He's definitely going to take an official visit to Ohio State. This is, got nothing to do with nothing. He's been to Ohio State probably 16 times unofficially. He's been to Bama twice. You know what I mean? Like, this is a dude who knows Ohio State well. This is a family who is like us. This is a father who was, it hit him different when he got that Ohio State offer when it first came in. And as you guys know, those of us in Akron, we got a pretty successful hit rate of our kids ending up in Columbus. So don't stress about that, man. Don't stress about that. Davey, what's up? Dave says the hard part of losing Ohio guys is the talent in state has really come up in the last few years. It'll be interesting to see how these guys are developed. That's it, man. That's it. The talent in state has just been, and that's the thing. Like, you guys know I follow Ohio high school football really closely. And as I'm watching these dudes come up as sophomores and then juniors, it's like I get so excited. Like, wow, man, the talent in the state is looking so great. And then we're feeding half of it out of the state. And it's like, man, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? My buddy Chad at the Best Damn Pod, you guys should check him out. His latest episode. Dan not with him recently. Dan doing the president of the houses of the world. And Dan busted my chops yesterday. He was busting my chops because I said that I watched the movie. My wife doesn't like watching the movie with me because I talk during the movie because I can't just not like let things happen in a plot. I have to say something. If there's a big plot hole or there's something that's totally unrealistic, I have to say something. And he said, like, we're probably thinking the same thing too. Like, we just want to enjoy the movie. And that's what she says. Maybe they'd be good movie partners. Apparently I'm not. Okay. All right. I get it. Blue Wolverine, thank you so much for the $9.99. Enjoy the live shows, Chuck. Know the enemy. Your knowledge and insight within videos helps to stay aware of the current landscape of the big. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I really try to stay on top of the news. Blue Wolverine gifted 10 memberships to Juck on Bucks. Thank you so much, buddy. That's awesome. I've got a new members video coming out, I think tomorrow. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that Rock Hill situation. Akron ain't a big city. That's what I'll tell you. Richard says, CJ Hicks is an athlete, but it takes more than athleticism. He doesn't have football IQ. I mean, that's, I've said my piece. I'm not going to say anymore. Dave says, is it me or have the best plays CJ has had been rushing the quarterback? Well, yeah, rushing the quarterback on a blitz. He can put a little juke move on you. What's he going to be able to do when he's on the line? I don't know. What's he going to be able to do in the run game? He's certainly not shown us he can do much so far. Mars says, I hope Josh Mickens pops off. Went to school with my little cousin. I really like Josh Mickens. And when we look at Josh Mickens, like, he just might be the one who excels in that role that they're trying to get CJ in. At any rate, you had to make the move, right? You had to make the move because what's the reason to bury him? Like those freshmen were going to pass him. You know what I mean? Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford would literally pass him. Like they're more natural already at linebackers. So what's the point of leaving him there? There isn't one. So go let him give it a shot. And you root for him. Lisa talking some junk on Dabo. Dabo's such a dweeb. I don't know. Like these kids are getting so bamboozled by this idiot. Day 1K wishes we put Clemson on the schedule. I hope we see him in the playoffs, man. I hope we see him in the playoffs because they think they're going to win the national championship this year. They're really excited for it. They're really excited for this season. Unfortunately, I actually think that they have a really good team this year. And I just actually said last week that based on the odds and based on their returning production, them being the number 7 odds with the number 1 returning production in the country from a playoff team, just from a gambling standpoint, they are the best bet right now, the best bang for your buck if you were going to take a flyer to bet on the national champion right now. Like it's really not close. The other teams on that list, whole lot of question marks, and Clemson with a proven quarterback, proven coach, returning production. Those are usually 3 recipes that you love to have in your national champion pick. Not saying I think they're going to win the national championship, but just about. Hold on, Richie. Richie said, we got news, guys. Richie said, Juck, Dave Biddle agreed to ask Ryan Day about bringing back the gray sleeves this morning. Now, this is huge news. Richie, I'm going to have to send Dave a message. How did this come up? Did this come up in conversation? Was this on the Morning Five? I need some more details on this. It's definitely time. We know it's time. Here's the thing, Richie. It's time they know how we all feel about this. Most of us, except for Chris Sowers, who was in my my older intro was Chris Sowers. We're talking about on a live show. We're talking about the gray sleeves, and I'm pulling up like everybody. Look at all your comments, and every comment I pull up is, Richard, this means nothing, bro. Honestly, absolutely nothing. Every comment I'm pulling up is everybody saying, I love the gray sleeves. I love the gray sleeves. And they, then I'm pulling up another one and there's Chris Sowers and he's like, I hate the gray sleeves. Like, no. Yeah, I'm telling you, it means nothing. It means nothing, man. Max Riley got crystal balled to Clemson by Steve Wiltfong 2 hours before. Like these things used to, mean something in the day before recruiting changed like this. Like these guys' decisions, when you introduce money into the equation, they change so fast that it means nothing. I'll tell you this, like his family loves Ohio State. His dad grew up with Nate Clements. John Hicks is a relative. Like everything's great. But I'll tell you something else. There's, a lot of schools pushing very, very, very hard who had their head coaches at Hoban High School the week before. And, that ain't a good look. Jimmy Jackson, the black uniforms and the gray ones during the JT era are the best uniforms in my humble opinion. The gray ones, was that the Gray Wolf ones, the Gray Wolf series ones you're talking about? I know a lot of people love that Wolf series. Bourbon Brent just loves the traditional scarlet and whites. I'm not thrilled with the black uniform set. What I would love to see is if now that you have the black as the same template. So if you wanted to maybe throw the black jersey in with the regular britches on a random Saturday in a regular helmet, like, yeah, I'm cool with that. Or if you wanted to wear the normal away set and throw the black helmet on, like, I'm cool with that. Like, I'm cool with mixing that up now that they're all the same. What I don't like to do often or ever really are the one-off totally different uniforms. Like, I'm good with using all of our colors in different templates. I don't like the totally different uniforms that don't look like Ohio State. They look like high schools that are mimicking Ohio State uniforms, or like what's our dude Jacob Weatherspoon over at Avon. So I actually do love high schools that use like college uniforms, like they rip them off. So Jacob Weatherspoon's high school is LSU uniforms. So you know what I mean? Like Peyton Pierce down at Lovejoy High School in Texas, they wear Buckeye uniforms. So Peyton Pierce has been wearing a Buckeye uniform since he was a freshman in high school, which is always cool. So I love it when I'm looking at pulling up somebody's recruiting film. Malik Autry from Opelika, Alabama last year, the #1 defensive tackle. We were in on him, and his high school, Opelika, was Buckeye uniforms and a Blocko. It's just funny. You know what I mean? Like, this is school in Alabama. They got the Blocko and they're wearing Buckeye uniforms. I love it. It's all fun. Brent says 9 out of 10 of the alt throwbacks I was not a fan of. Like, what I hated was wearing them during the Michigan game. Oh, here we go. That's what Brent said. I like the alts, but I hate when we wear them for Michigan. Like, that's it. I want to see those traditional uniforms. That's so much of the part of the history for me, is those two uniforms squaring off. Though I wish we would go to home and home at least, a couple of times here and there. USC and UCLA do it every time now. It's gorgeous. I don't think ours would look quite as good as that, just because I don't know what it is. The contrast between the UCLA powder blue and the Cardinal just look beautiful. But I would like to see Ohio State and Michigan wear the home and homes. I think that would just be a beautiful look. The shots that I love the best are the shots down the line where you see the helmets and you see the jerseys, and those are my favorite pictures of the rivalry. And just once to be able to see the home and home would be like, man, that's awesome. Now, we do have some pictures existing from back in the day, but the color's been filled in because they were black and white. So it's not true photographs of it when they used to do home and home. Richie says, stay focused. We need the gray sleeves back permanently. All right, my friends. We're at an hour. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys so much. We got a big audience today. That was great. Please set your bells. Set those bells if you're watching this later on a recording so that you can join us on our next live show, as I don't have a consistent live schedule, but I do try to get at least one of these in a week to talk to you guys live. But again, I always read your comments and I usually respond if I agree with you. If I don't, then I can't, I just don't want to be mean and disagree with you. So I just leave it blank and I'll give you a heart or something. Anyway, I appreciate you guys so much. Please like the video on the way out. And thank you guys so much for joining me. I will talk to you soon, maybe as soon as tomorrow, maybe not, maybe Friday, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what the news brings us. If it's something juicy, I'll certainly be back on, and I will talk to you guys later. Chuck and Bucks out.